So we're only a couple days away, right, from the Lindsay Clancy trial, and she's the mom of 3 that claims she had postpartum psychosis. Prosecutors are saying that it was more premeditated than that, but she harmed her 3 children and then went up to her second story of her home, jumped out of the window, and that's why she's in a wheelchair, because she is paralyzed from the waist down. Now, doing my research a couple of weeks ago, came across 87 pages of letters of support for Lindsay. And a lot of these are from her coworkers, her close friends, even strangers in the community that has experience or has had postpartum psychosis themselves. Now, I really feel like this is going to give you a glimpse into what we're going to see over the next couple of weeks with at least her defense. And I just wanted to read to you a couple of statements that stuck out to me that will give background and just more context of the entire situation. The first one is from a nurse that she was coworkers with, and she states, "I understand how heart-wrenching this family story is to hear, since it has caused myself and other nurses and doctors, included in the Mass General Brigham family, heartbreak since that dreadful night. Lindsay's a strong, compassionate, and loving nurse who would never harm anyone. I'm so heavy-hearted to hear the pain that she has been suffering with after each one of the births of her children." Now, that wording to me is interesting because maybe she expressed having postpartum, at least depression, with the end of her pregnancy with each of her 3 children. She says, "Our healthcare model fails families like the Clancy family. We do very little to concretely help a mother who's suffering with postpartum depression. When it comes to postpartum psychosis, we failed completely." Now, this next letter is from Lindsay's friend that she's known since 6th grade, and she feels like she met her at such a young age, but that anyone is lucky to know Lindsay at any point in their lifetime. She always knew exactly what she wanted to do when she grew up. She wanted to be a mother, find a good husband, and work in the medical field to help others. In high school, she signed up for an optional child development class and chose to work at a daycare, and was so impressive. The teacher hired her to babysit at her own family special events because of how impressed she was. Now, she says, "I think one of the best ways to gather Lindsay's true character was through something that we learned in child development by watching her children. This is called observational learning that would often come out during playtime. It's the concept that children at that age often play by mimicking what they see at the home and the way that they themselves are treated. This is especially true when a child plays the common game of house, where they go about doing the things that their own family does, often using dolls to represent the children in the family. And Lindsay's little girl, Cora, was her mini-me, and she wanted to grow up and have a job in the medical field like her mom, and she loved playing house and mommy and would copy swaddling her brothers and sisters with a sweet, gentle nature." Now, this one is from a labor and delivery nurse who worked with Lindsay during the night shift. She says, "She was always rubbing her belly anytime she was expecting, excited to do milestones with her children like preschool, buying a house. She even would often check on her kids sleeping on the monitor during her breaks while breast pumping." This one's from another nurse. She says, "There's no doubt Lindsay suffered from postpartum psychosis. Please have compassion and allow her to recover in an environment other than a jail cell. I believe this will change the way that we treat women who suffer from postpartum depression. Even in the most horrific moment of her life, Lindsay is still helping people." And this next one's from a coworker of Lindsay's, and it looks like she might have a little more insight. She says that Lindsay and her husband worked so hard to get the help that Lindsay needed. And through so much, how could prison be the answer to this family? They've already lost so much. I could have been Lindsay, one of us, any of us could have been. I also suffered from postpartum depression after my second child, and I had a difficult time getting help. I was aware I was just not right, but it took 20 months to get a healthcare provider to acknowledge my concerns, and that was over 29 years ago, but I fear that enough is still not being done, and we need to change to help support our mamas and their precious babies." Then there is a doctor that wrote a letter who worked on a similar case. And he says, "I was an expert witness on a similar case in Holland, where a mother offed her 2 children with a sharp object. She obviously suffered and was prescribed medications, which is a dangerous harm of a psychosis drug. And she was totally ignored by her doctors, even though she begged to get help. And she went up to do everything she possibly could. And then he was just offering his assistance. This next one is from a CPCS advocate and says, "This list of medications that Lindsay's on is horrifying. It's like the doctors just threw spaghetti out the wall to see what would stick. I can't believe that the doctors prescribed SSRIs with antipsychotics. It's tough because postpartum mental illness is unique in that it only happens in women and it only happens after women give birth. It's not a permanent state or a lifelong severity illness, but it's brought on by massive hormone surges." This next one is from a woman who experienced similar side effects being on 16 medications. So she says, "After having my son at 34, I suffered from what I believed was postpartum depression in 1990, as well as early menopause. This presented itself in sleep issues, depression, and anxiety. Doctors had me go to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist diagnosed me with bipolar. When after 3 weeks, my symptoms were worse. He then diagnosed me as bipolar 2. I experienced psychotic episodes many times and was being hospitalized in some very top-rated psychiatric hospitals." Then she continues and says, "Nobody could figure out that I had an incorrect diagnosis follow me for 17 years until I swallowed 90 Klonopin and tried to harm myself. I was hospitalized at the University of MN for a month. The head doctor realized that I was misdiagnosed and my problems and symptoms were from the wrong diagnosis as well as wrongfully prescribing psychotic meds, which were as many as 16 pills a day. After nearly 10 years of being off all the meds, I'm finally no longer wanting to self-harm or psychotic." Now, I did just listen to the final pretrial hearing that was held this week, and the defense was trying to have some witnesses testify who has experienced psychotic episodes after postpartum, right? And the judge ruled not in their favor and said, "Listen, like, we don't know who these witnesses are. We don't know how credible they are, and we are not going to allow it." From just seeing all these letters, though, I know that there's enough support being rallied around her to where if she truly did experience postpartum psychosis, that they will be able to hopefully put all the cards on the table and show at least some of these letters, whether it be in expert witnesses, to just give more of a perspective. And I personally am looking forward to covering this case. So tell me if you're tuning in. And either way, I just hope that it's a close of a chapter that seems so sensitive, so heartbreaking, and just the more I read about it, like, the harder it is to hear.